Incredible revelation. Nurse urgently warned this Korean Mafia boss to run. The shocking truth behind the chaos. Sarah's hands trembled as she prepared the IV line, her focus stretched taut between professional duty and conflicting emotions. The emergency room buzzed with an uneasy energy. Gunshot victims and overdoses had become a regular night shift occurrence. But tonight was different. The moment they wheeled in Jin, the infamous Korean Mafia boss whose reign of terror rattled the neighborhood, the air transformed. Her mind raced with dread. Was she about to save a monster? What would her father think if he knew he was treating the very man who cast shadows over his grocery store? Flashes of vivid memories cascaded through her thoughts. The storefront vandalism, the whispers about protection fees, the nervous tension that had become the backdrop of her life. Each life saved felt like a flickering candle against encroaching darkness. But Jin represented a different kind of turmoil, one that itched at her spine. Here was a man who directed fear with ruthless precision, now lying helpless, his body mangled on a gurney. A part of her, fueled by justice, clamored to report him. Yet another part whispered doubts, echoing the unrelenting loyalty she held for family. Her inner conflict felt like a weight crushing her chest. Could she really send him back into a world that might come after her father? She caught his gaze, a dark intensity sparking amidst his pain. As she stabilized him, lines of betrayal and vulnerability etched into her mind. With each breath, she fought the urge to recoil. Run, she found herself murmuring, a warning that slipped despite her better judgment. Her maternal instincts kicked in, but in the back of her mind, a panic-stricken voice screamed. Was she seeking to betray her community's safety? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The days bled into one another. As she cared for Jin, their conversations peeled layers off the man beneath the surface. The streetwise warrior driven to a dark place by loyalty to a family that tangled him in webs of violence. Beneath his hardened exterior lay burdens born from choices that echoed her own family's call for survival. Her heart wavered, mirroring his dilemmas. What about her father's dreams? What if Jin's next move spiraled into violence that would seep into their corners of the world? Each shared story fortified their bond. Paradoxically, the danger circled closer. Anxiety twisted in her gut like a knotted thread. She recognized fleeting glances of betrayal among his associates, a brewing storm that threatened both of their lives. As the walls closed in and whispers of deceit permeated the air like a dark smog, Sarah stood paralyzed in the quicksand of her choices. Then that night arrived, the one that would thrust her into a tempest of moral reckoning. Just as she decided to set a plan in motion for their escape from this discord, a guttural sense of dread washed over her. A message slipped from Jin, dark and urgent, hinting at a betrayal staged by someone within his own ranks. The sanctuary she wove around their intimacy was crumbling, lined with shadows that threatened to consume them both. In a heartbeat, the pressure intensified. With lives at stake, Sarah found herself frozen between her duty to society and the silent sympathy she harbored for the man who had become so terribly human to her. The sirens of her conflict wailed in tandem with the chaos swirling around Jin. An electrifying ultimatum gripped her. Choose a path in a world woven with blood, vengeance, and impossible decisions. The night was closing in, leaving her at the precipice of her greatest fear. Where would she place her loyalty when it mattered most? As the night deepened, Sarah stood at the crossroads of her existence. The antiseptic smell of the ER mingled with the metallic tang of fear that hung in the air, an unsettling backdrop for a decision that would change her life forever. Jin lay unconscious, the heaving of his chest steady but faint. echoes of painful truths lingering in his breaths. She felt like a tightrope walker, balancing precariously between morality and loyalty, each thought adding more weight to her dilemma. Could she afford to protect him, or would she be inviting chaos into her family's life? The urgency in Jin's message clawed at her. Someone from his inner circle was plotting against him, and it was clear that time was running out. An instinct pushed her to act, not out of some misplaced romance, but from an awareness that fear can drive a person to extremes. It was a reminder that, for every choice he made in the seedy underbelly of his world, he too had to make sacrifices. She felt a flicker of power in knowing that she, a mere nurse, could wield influence over his fate, even if it meant making dark, weighty decisions. Caught in the spiraling forces at play, she sought refuge behind the closed door of the ER's supply room for a moment of clarity. Her heart raced, and her thoughts strayed to her father's dreams of expansion. A bakery, a restaurant perhaps, a life ringed with the comforts of normalcy. The echo of laughter once filled their home, a warmth now overshadowed by the chill of Jin's presence. Could she tether her fate to someone like him? A growl of self-doubt turned inward, scratching against her resolve. She had always defined success by her ability to save lives. But now she was grappling not with how to save Jin, but rather whether saving him could lead to the destruction of everything she cherished. Suddenly, the mechanical beeping of the machines turned piercing, grounding her further in the moment. What if their conversations had begun to mean something else? Was she formed by her ideals, or shaped by her choices? This introspection revealed a hidden competence within her, the ability to see beyond binaries, to recognize the gray areas that stretched between right and wrong, survival and sacrifice. "Find out who it is," she whispered, nearly a prayer. She would infiltrate the world she had evaded, using her position in the hospital to gather information, to discover who sought to destroy Jin. This would not only save him, but potentially save her family too. She felt the unfamiliar swell of determination rise, energizing her resolve. Returning to Jin's bedside, she quietly devised a plan. She would need to gain the trust of his associates, blend into the very environment that had always frightened her. The adrenaline thrummed through her veins, a precarious yet thrilling sensation. She knew her next steps wouldn't be easy. Navigating this treacherous path would sharpen her instincts and hone her abilities in ways she never anticipated. "I'll get you out of here, but you need to tell me everything," she instructed Jin, gathering her courage as she prepared to initiate a delicate dance of survival amidst the chaos. And then, unexpectedly, he opened his eyes, dark depths reflecting a flicker of vulnerability, transcendent from their previous interactions. It dawned on her that she had not only become his protector, but perhaps unwittingly his partner in navigating a world that threatened to engulf them both. "Are you with me?" Jin asked, the gravity of his question laden with more than just a partnership. It hinged upon her willingness to risk everything she had ever known. The decision weighed heavily on her, but with danger sprawling out like a web around them both, Sarah felt the course of her life veering into unknown territory. In embracing the shadows, she had to ask herself, who was the real enemy? The clock ticked incessantly, pulling her toward an intersection of fate that promised to test every ounce of her character. "How far are you willing to go?" she mused, her heart pounding with the realization that she was no longer just a nurse, but a key player in a deadly game. The moment had come to confront her deepest fears, the stakes rising as they faced a world she could no longer ignore. The thrill of the unknown coiled tightly around her, setting the stage for a confrontation that would demand her ultimate loyalty. The first light of dawn crept through the tiny window of the ER, illuminating Sarah's face as she sat quietly beside Jin. His breathing had steadied, but the gravity of their situation pressed heavily upon her. As the chaos of the night began to dissolve, the clarity she craved slipped further from her grasp. She found herself caught in the echo of his request. "Are you with me?" His piercing question replayed in her mind, setting fire to her resolve. It reverberated not just as a challenge but as an understanding, transforming her purpose from mere survival into something more complex and layered. With each passing moment, the potential consequences of her choices crystallized. The professionals she had once relied upon, the doctors, the nurses, all saw her as simply one of them, a cog in the machinery of the hospital. Yet, now she found herself weaving a narrative much more compelling, wrapped in intrigue and danger. What skills would she need to navigate this perilous path? How deep into the shadows could she go before losing herself completely? Determined, she focused on the objective: gather intelligence while ensuring Jin's safety. She would venture into his world, a realm she had only seen from the fringes, and to do this well, she needed to redefine her identity. No longer just Sarah the nurse, she had to embrace her role as an investigator, a strategist. As the hospital began to buzz with life, her mind raced with plans. She would leverage her position, infiltrate meetings disguised as a supportive ally, and collect whispers of deceit that floated through the air like specters. Trust would be her currency, and she would need to learn the nuances of Jin's circle, who could be trusted, and who was the traitor lurking in the shadows. Her first move came almost instinctively. She approached Marla, a fellow nurse who had a reputation for knowing everything that happened within the hospital and beyond. They had worked together for years, and Sarah sensed a connectivity in her gaze, one that could blossom into an alliance. "Marla," she began, her tone clipped and purposeful. "I need your help. It's personal." Marla's brow raised, keenly aware that Sarah didn't usually seek help, especially on matters not strictly medical. "What's going on?" Without divulging all the details, Sarah pointed out anomalies in the ER, patients who seemed too terrified to cooperate, whispered conversations that dissolved the moment she entered the room. Marla nodded, curiosity piqued. "You think there's something bigger here?" "Yes," Sarah whispered fiercely. "I believe it's about Jin. He's in danger, and I need to find out who wants him gone." Marla hesitated, calculating the risks. Then she nodded slowly. "All right, I'll keep my ears open. But if you're getting in over your head—" "I know," Sarah interjected, her confidence both an anchor and a territory at risk. "But this isn't just about him. It's about everything and everyone I care about." As they parted ways, Sarah felt the tension weave through her muscles, her body thrumming with purpose. Each interaction would require a performance, a careful blend of authenticity and deception. The thrill coursed through her, igniting an unexpected excitement. For years, she had been confined to the predictable rhythms of patient care. Now, she was stepping onto a stage where the stakes were life and death. But with that thrill came a tightening knot of anxiety. How far had she delved into Jin's world? And would she recognize herself if she crossed the point of no return? The lines were blurring, her mission demanding every ounce of grit and ingenuity she possessed. Jin's vulnerabilities entwined with her own burgeoning strength as they began this perilous journey together. Then, as she prepared to leave for her shift, a shiver of foreboding coursed through her. What if this trust she was fostering would come back to bite them both? As she laced up her shoes, the realization struck her. Every decision she made echoed through this intricate web of alliances and betrayals. Unbeknownst to her, the clock was ticking down, complicating their intertwining destinies. She glanced at the clock. How long before everything came crashing down? What awaited her in the uncertain shadows of these intertwined lives? As she rushed out, a chilling realization settled in the pit of her stomach. The enemy could already be closer than she imagined. The soft rhythm of footsteps echoed through the bustling hallways of the hospital as Sarah entered the ER for her shift, adrenaline still thrumming in her veins from the revelations of the morning. She had crossed an invisible threshold. Today, she was not merely a caregiver. She was a guardian, entwined in a web of intrigue, tasked with uncovering the peril facing Jin. She settled into her routine, her nurse's uniform serving as both armor and disguise. As she moved between patients, Her mind shifted into investigative mode. Every nod, every whisper, every fleeting glance held potential meaning, the lifeblood of her new purpose. Navigating this world required finesse, balancing the authenticity of her nursing duties with the subterfuge of her newfound role. As the hours passed, Sarah's thoughts lingered on her earlier conversation with Marla. She knew Marla's instincts were sharp, but trusting anyone fully felt precarious. She had witnessed countless betrayals firsthand, building a fortress of walls for her own protection. Yet, there was a sliver of hope nestled within her. She needed allies, and shaping her dynamic with Marla was imperative. The fluorescent lights hummed above her, each flicker mirroring her fluctuating confidence. Were her suspicions unfounded? Did Jin's enemies lurk in every corner of their shared world? A wave of self-criticism washed over her. Why had she accepted this burden? The safety of her heart teetered on the edge of potential disaster. As she prepared medications in the pharmacy, she caught sight of a nurse from another department, breezing past with an air of purpose and laughter. Sarah envied that ease, that unguarded spirit, and craved the ability to return to her old self without the weight of Jin's fate anchoring her down. A flash of anger ignited within her. Her complacency had gone too long unchallenged. No more. She needed to push beyond her current limitations to uncover the truths concealed in the shadows. A crucial encounter punctuated her shift. A patient in room 7, a reclusive man with visible signs of distress, had been acting skittishly. As she entered to check on him, his haunted gaze darted to the door. The heaviness in the air prickled her skin. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her voice steady yet probing. He shifted nervously. I can't talk here." His eyes flickered with recognition that stung deep, a flash of understanding shared between them. Sarah's heart raced. This was her moment, suspended on a razor's edge. "You can trust me," she whispered, closing the distance, her role as a nurse merging with that of an investigator. "Please, you have to help me," he gasped, words tumbling out as if the very act of helping had once more rendered him immobile. "They're watching. If they know I'm talking..." She leaned in closer, fingers trembling lightly on the edge of the bed. Who's watching you?" "I can't say. Just know this. You and Jin need to run." Time seemed to halt, the gravity of his warning enveloping her. As his breath quickened, each heartbeat echoed the very essence of her mission. A wave of icy realization swept over her as dread coiled around her gut. With a mind spinning in chaos and questions, Sarah felt a surge of both fear and resolve. Was it paranoia? Or was this man's warning valid? The realization dawned upon her that the threat was not just external. It was endemic, entangled with her determination and her unfolding identity. "Wait," she began, but he was already retreating into a silence born of fear, and she was left standing at the precipice of everything she had embraced. Had she reached too far too fast? What would the warning mean for Jin? Her hands trembled from a mixture of anxiety and urgency as she turned back towards the nurse's station. She had to decipher this complex web. Now, more than ever, she knew she had to act. Each decision felt monumental. The stakes had escalated. Trust would be her most potent weapon, yet the fear of betrayal nagged incessantly. How far into danger was she willing to traverse in the name of loyalty? As she steeled herself, a new thought bored deep into her mind. Who truly was pulling the strings behind the scenes? The horizon of her reality darkened as doubt threaded through her thoughts, amplifying the urgency of the moment. But she was ready to double down. She would confront the danger head-on or risk losing everything she held dear. With each calculated breath, Sarah's internal resolve hardened. The path ahead lay cloaked in shadows, and she needed to illuminate it before it swallowed her whole. The next decision loomed like an impending storm. Would she enlist help from Marla? Strengthening alliances and gathering intelligence was paramount. Yet would that agreement come with unforeseen consequences? The glint of the clock's hand reminded her time was running out. With her heart racing, Sarah grasped her phone, ready to reach out, the haunting question spiraling in her mind. What did the next move hold? The line between danger and salvation began to blur as she contemplated the choices ahead, leading her to a precipice where trust might falter and betrayal could emerge from the shadows. The clock ticked ominously, pushing her closer to the edge where true peril lurked. The faint beeping of the heart monitor pulled Sarah back into the present moment as she stood in front of the nurse's station, her mind still swirling with the patient's words. The energy of the emergency room pulsated with a chaotic vitality, yet all she felt was a suffocating silence around her, as if the world had dimmed to calibrate for the weight of what she carried. She couldn't shake the undeniable urgency creeping beneath her skin, the clear implication of impending danger for Jin. As she gathered her thoughts, every instinct screamed at her to act quickly. But what steps should she take? Trust was essential, but it also reeked of vulnerability. The memory of past betrayals clawed at her resolve. "Sarah, is everything okay?" Marla's voice broke through, her brow furrowing with concern. "Yeah, just a lot on my plate," Sarah replied, forcing a smile to mask the storm of conflict within. She noted Marla's perceptive nature, a double-edged sword in a landscape where naivety could lead to ruin. If she chose to confide in Marla, she needed to be strategic. "Can we talk?" Sarah blurted out, unable to hold back the need for an ally who could assist her in navigating this treacherous path. Marla hesitated, the tension evident as she assessed Sarah's demeanor. "Sure, let's step outside for a moment." Together, they found a secluded corner away from the frenetic buzz of the ER. Sarah's heart raced, not from anxiety, but from the gravity of her mission. "I need your help," she began, the words tumbling out with earnest urgency. "There's something going on. Something serious." Marla's eyes narrowed, a blend of curiosity and caution. "What do you mean? Is it about Jin?" How could she convey the layers of complexity without sounding paranoid? "A patient warned me he's in danger. There are people watching. I think it's connected to something larger." "Wait, what do you mean?" Marla cut in, her voice sharp with disbelief. "This could be dangerous, Sarah. Are you sure? In this place, we see danger every day." Sarah's eyes gleamed with determination. "But this is different, and if we don't do something—" Marla shifted, casting a glance over her shoulder, reflecting Sarah's own trepidation. "You're right, but we also have to be smart. We can't just rush in blindly." A wave of gratitude filled Sarah. She saw the resolve in Marla's expression. "Exactly. We need to gather information, assess the situation more wisely." As they discussed potential strategies, Sarah marveled at her own mental agility, newfound traits emerging in the crucible of crisis. She was evolving from a mere nurse into a proactive agent. The flickers of her earlier self, the frightened and complacent Sarah, felt distant. "Let's analyze any recent admissions. Maybe something will connect," Marla suggested, igniting Sarah's hope. "Right. And we should also check surveillance footage around the hospital." She thought of the man's warnings. What if they figured out that she was onto something? But uncertainty loomed like a heavy fog. As they returned to the chaos of the ER, Sarah felt an unsettling weight on her conscience. What truths might they uncover? Would this investigation turn against them? Moments later, another patient rolled into the ER, a man with a gruesome injury, the details of which became overshadowed by the racing thoughts in her head. Despite the urgency of the situation, shadows of doubt and fear lingered in her mind. What if this goes too far? The internal conflict gnawed at her. She had crossed a line already. Was it worth the risk? As she aided the incoming patient, her reflexes sharp, Sarah questioned the threshold of loyalty and safety. Would uncovering the truth about Jin justify the potential cost to her own well-being and that of her loved ones? The high-stakes choices surrounded her now like a gauntlet she had to navigate, and each second brought her closer to a breach, an exposure, a betrayal, a revelation that spiraled outside of her control. What vital truths lay obscured beneath the chaos, waiting to be revealed? With every instinct driving her forward, Sarah felt an unquenchable thirst for justice. But at what cost? The door to the unknown cracked open wider. The only question left was whether she could handle what lay beyond it. Would her bravery be her greatest asset, or a candle burning at both ends? As the tension crescendoed, the clock's hand ticked louder, echoing the urgency of her next step. The chaos of the emergency room buzzed around Sarah as she sat at the break room table, the faint hum of fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of thoughts racing through her mind. Marla, seated across from her, flipped through the records they'd printed out, admission logs that could hold the key to untangling the deadly web surrounding Jin. "Here," Marla said, jabbing a finger at a date. "This patient. He came in just days before Jin. Look at his injuries." Eyes darting to the report, Sarah's heart sank. The man had wounds consistent with a gang-related assault. The same kind of violence she had navigated her entire career, but hadn't faced head-on until today. "This might connect to the threats," Sarah muttered, feeling the urgency mount. Marla looked concerned, shifting in her seat. "We need to take this seriously, Sarah. Digging deeper could expose us to danger." The words settled like lead in Sarah's stomach. Did Marla see her fervor as reckless? Yet, the taste of resolve solidified in her, a rallying point against that sense of vulnerability. "We need to understand the landscape we're moving in. We need to learn more about this patient and the others like him." Determined, Sarah unearthed every experience she possessed. Those fleeting moments of intuition, the pulse of emergency medicine imbued in her very being. She hadn't merely been a nurse. She was a safeguard in this chaotic environment. Each decision she made mattered profoundly, and now it was time to embrace her inner authority. "What's our next step?" Marla asked, hesitance flaring in her voice. "We should go through the surveillance footage," Sarah replied, composure sharpening. "We might see something unusual that ties the patients together or puts us on a list of targets," Marla interrupted, her expression twisted with concern. "Maybe," Sarah replied, a steely conviction fueling her words. "But if we uncover this threat, we could save Jin. We owe him that much." The pleading in Sarah's voice revealed the duality of her motivations, genuine concern for Jin, and the urgent, growing need to stand against her fears. They agreed on their plan, and Sarah felt an electric thrill course through her. She was stepping beyond the bounds of her role. No longer just a nurse toiling in anonymity, she was becoming the catalyst for change. As they navigated back to their comfortable realm of medicine, Sarah's mind flickered with memories of past challenges, those days when she recoiled in terror instead of seizing the moment. Each instance shimmered like a beacon, leading her forward. Hours later, they found themselves in a dimly lit room set aside for security footage analysis. The silence felt palpable, broken only by the flickering screens and mechanical whir of the computers. The moments that passed fueled Sarah's burgeoning confidence. "Here we go," Marla whispered, pulling up the date they'd analyzed. The footage rolled across the screen, revealing the garage entrance near the ER. The colors and shadows flickered in rapid succession, illuminating casual pedestrians and healthcare staff hustling between shifts. Then, a figure caught Sarah's eye, a man in a black cap, suspiciously sweeping through the frame. Her heart raced. "Stop!" Sarah called out, pointing. "That's him!" Marla leaned closer, observing intently. "Are you sure?" "I can almost feel it," Sarah breathed deeply, the familiar mix of anxiety and purpose flooding her senses. "He's been here before." With every second passing, Sarah felt the pieces of their investigation come together, but her rising adrenaline carried a warning. This was just the beginning. As they compared footage with patient data, a chilling realization crept in. The man wasn't only monitoring Jin. His presence swelled with implications that extended beyond their immediate circle, suggesting an organized threat with deep roots in the hospital's underbelly. Dread, tinged with resolve, clogged Sarah's throat. She had to confront this chaotic tide head-on. A voice in her pushed against the rising doubt. This was her moment of decision. She could let fear sweep her away or anchor herself firmly against it. "Let's contact the authorities," Sarah finally said, the words cutting through the fog of confusion. But even as she spoke, a stark realization hit her. It wasn't just about Jin anymore. She was about to step into a battle that might consume them both. Marla raised an eyebrow, her apprehension evident. "Are we ready for that?" "Better to act now than wait," Sarah replied, resolve hardening her voice. "If we don't..." The echo of impending consequence loomed over them both as uncertainty loomed like a thundercloud. Would her actions truly protect Jin, or would they invalidate her resolve and place her, and Marla, into the crosshairs of something far darker than they could imagine? In the depths of this urgency, a nagging thought twisted in Sarah's mind as another piece of information surfaced. What other secrets lurked just beneath the surface? As they prepared to execute their plan, a pulse of fear ignited within her. The unknown was almost palpable. What awaited them as they unraveled the threads? Only time would tell if this path would lead to salvation or destruction. As the tension in the dimly lit room mounted, Sarah steadied her breath, feeling the weight of her decision. Contacting the authorities could indeed spiral into a confrontation beyond anything she had faced in her medical career. The chaotic hum of the emergency room echoed faintly in her ears, a reminder of the fragility of life and the duality of her existence as both healer and investigator. "Quick," she said, glancing at Marla, urgency threading through her tone. "Let's piece together everything we have. We need to prepare before we reach out to anyone." Marla nodded, her analytical mind racing as they scrambled through patient files and the dense surveillance footage. The soft clicks of the keyboard became a heartbeat, matched by the anxious rhythm of Sarah's thoughts. With each detail they uncovered, Sarah found herself deepening her connection to the case. Not only was it about saving Jin, but a profound awareness of her own capacity began to surface. She had often felt like a cog in the vast machine of the hospital, but the realization solidified within her now. She could be a fulcrum for change, a pivot point that altered the balance of a dangerous game. As they combed through additional footage, another familiar figure emerged. A nurse she often crossed paths with, someone who seemed to share a connection with that menacing individual. Could she be involved? Marla whispered, the weight of the realization thickening the air around them. That could explain why Jin was targeted, Sarah pondered, feeling her heart race. We have to know her history, her connections. The thought horrified her. The hospital, where she had strived to create a sanctuary, suddenly felt like a treacherous terrain riddled with lies. Doubts flickered in her mind, a part of her questioning everything she had believed about the safety of their workplace. "Sarah?" Marla's voice pulled her back. "We can't assume too much. She may be innocent." As a seasoned nurse, Sarah knew too well that innocence didn't equate to safety. "I just can't shake the feeling, Marla. She's too close to everything, and if she's allied with whoever is threatening Jin, we have to act fast." With grit, the pair transitioned from analyzing footage to planning their approach. They needed verifiable information on this nurse, and Sarah's mind raced as she recalled her interactions. Each moment seemed to weave a deeper web of suspicion. The investigation required precision, and her growing understanding of resources and relationships reminded her of her past successes in the chaos of the ER. "Let's go through her schedule. If she's been in close proximity to these patients, it could tie everything together," Sarah suggested, determination igniting her resolve further. Marla's eyes widened, acknowledging the gravity of their intention. "You know this could lead us into dangerous waters, right? Every day in this job has potential danger. Sarah replied, her voice steadier than she felt. But we've come too far to back down now. As they dug deeper, a sense of power washed over Sarah, pushing her fears aside. Her mind began to see connections that hadn't been visible before, each detail leading her toward the realization of her own strength. She wasn't just an observer. She was an actor on this stage, and the narrative was shifting in her favor. Suddenly, a notification pinged on Marla's phone. It was a message from an unknown number. Their breathing halted as Marla hesitated, glancing at Sarah before unlocking her screen. "Do you want to read it aloud?" Sarah prompted, the tension saturating the air. Marla's eyes widened as she read the contents. "You're getting too close. Back off, or you'll regret it." Fear gripped their hearts, yet within it was the spark of caution, igniting a deeper resilience. For the first time, Sarah felt the weight of the threat shift to burden a collective resolve rather than her fragile spirit alone. "Now we know we're onto something big," she declared, a mixture of dread and exhilaration swirling within her. Suddenly, the atmosphere felt charged. The game had changed. The unknown that lay ahead unfolded like a dark abyss. Would they emerge stronger, or would the shadows consume them? As they strategized their next move, an unsettling thought clung to the back of Sarah's mind. Could they truly protect Jin, or were they merely pawns in a more sinister plot unfolding? One that would test not only their skills, but the very essence of their moral fortitude. What lay ahead was no longer a simple investigation. It had transformed into a battle for survival, both for Jin and their own burgeoning destinies. Would they be able to unravel the truth before it was too late? Only time would tell. Marla's phone buzzed again, jolting them out of their tense moment. Another message from the same unknown number, this one even more insistent. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. Walk away now." Sarah felt a pulse of adrenaline surge through her. While fear twisted in her gut, the words ignited a fierce resolve. Those threats served as a cruel affirmation that they were on the right path. She was no longer just a nurse confined to her duties. She was beginning to step into a role where she could effect significant change. "Let's move," Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. "We need to confront our suspicions before the trail goes cold. If this nurse is a part of something bigger, we can't linger any longer in the shadows." Marla nodded, driven by Sarah's newfound confidence. They gathered their notes, data, and the files on both Piotr, who posed a threat to Jin, and the concerned nurse. Each step toward the nursing station felt like approaching a battlefield, filled with unseen dangers and the weight of their choices bearing down on them. As they entered the brightly lit corridor, their gazes darted around, scanning for any sign of the nurse. The hospital hummed with life, yet a disquieting chill crackled beneath the surface. Each heartbeat was underscored by the delicate nature of what they planned to confront. Were they ready to uncover truths that may endanger not just their careers, but their very lives? With a deep breath, Sarah pulled up the nurse's schedule on her phone. "She's on shift now, in the private ward. We should approach her there. But let's be cautious. If she's involved in something illicit, she might sense our intentions." Marla's eyes narrowed in determination as they navigated the labyrinthine hallways. Sarah focused on the path ahead, a mix of dread and excitement bubbling within her. The stakes had never been higher, and the thought of protecting Jin grew ever more compelling. Something had shifted within her, an awakening of purpose driving her forward. Arriving at the private ward, they paused outside the door, exchanging sidelong glances. "Ready?" Sarah breathed, her heart thudding. "As ready as we can be," Marla replied, tension lacing her voice. They entered, and the sight of the nurse uncloaked in their view. The once familiar face now felt like a ghost from a past Sarah never knew existed. "Hi, can I help you?" the nurse said, an edge of cool indifference masking her expression as she looked up from the patient's chart. "Do you have a moment?" Sarah stepped closer, her voice firm yet calm. "We need to discuss Jin and the circumstances around his recent treatment." The nurse's demeanor shifted slightly, a fleeting spark of interest igniting in her eyes. "Is this about the infection? I'm not sure how much I can—" "Not just that," Sarah interjected, a ripple of assertiveness surging through her. "We believe there's something more happening here, and we suspect you might be connected to it. There's no point in pretending. If you have information—" "Are you accusing me of something?" The nurse cut in, a tight smile stretching across her face, but her gaze faltered. "Just give us clarity before we take this further," Marla added, her presence backing Sarah's confrontational approach. They were not mere bystanders anymore. They were motivated agents seeking the truth, however perilous that truth might be. The nurse narrowed her eyes, and in that brief moment, something within Sarah clicked. It wasn't just about investigating the case. It was realizing her strength as a professional who could command authority despite her status. The fear curled in her gut, but mingled with the fervor of empowerment. The battlefield she stood in was one she could navigate. Their confrontation developed into a rapid-fire exchange, and with each word, a new layer peeled back, revealing motives, threats, and veiled alliances. As the nurse's facade began to falter, Sarah recognized they were wrestling not merely with information, but betrayal. Just then, a loud crash echoed down the hallway, interrupting their tense standoff, a clear warning shot that they were not alone. In that moment, Sarah's heart raced faster, centering her focus. Would this lead to revelations, or would it ignite a firestorm of violence? "Let's finish this," she proposed, her tone firm, both a question and a command. But one truth loomed larger than any threat. A reckoning was near, and in this dense fog of danger, a confrontation awaited that would reshape not only her future, but the weight of the lives they protected. As they moved to engage further with the nurse, a heavy silence cloaked the corridor, echoing the unsaid vows of those moments. Not only was she safeguarding Jin, but also discovering the warrior within herself, one molding past fears into a solid resolve. Just how deep does this go? She thought, and the answer whispered back from the shadows, ominous yet alluring. The real game of survival was beginning. The nurse's eyes darted to the door as the sound of footsteps approached, but after a moment's hesitation, she positioned herself more defiantly. Her demeanor had shifted from cool indifference to something akin to desperation, and Sarah felt the anticipation crackling in the air like static. "What do you really want?" the nurse snapped, her previous calm unraveling. "You think you can barge in here, accuse me, and walk away unscathed?" A flicker of anger surged within Sarah. This was no longer merely about Jin or uncovering the truth, but about standing her ground. "We want answers, and you're in a position to give them to us. Don't play games," she replied, each word deliberate. Marla moved slightly behind Sarah, attempting to project a united front. The nurse regained her composure, taking a step back, but Sarah noticed the crack in her facade. The confrontation was no longer a fleeting moment. It was a battle that offered insight into their adversary. "Listen," the nurse began, her voice now lowered. "If I were you, I'd steer clear of this situation. Trust me, you don't want to be involved with what's happening here." Sarah steadied her breath, pushing down the faint tremor of fear that fluttered in her chest. This was an opportunity, a moment that revealed vulnerability. Was it fear for herself, or for some greater consequence she had yet to understand? "We've come too far to back down now. If there's something you know, it's time to come clean." In that charged moment, the hospital seemed to vanish, and Sarah found herself within a microcosm of a wider world filled with threats and uncertainties. The nurse was no longer just an uncomfortable acquaintance, but a gatekeeper to a perilous truth. "That doesn't mean there aren't repercussions," the nurse replied, her voice almost pleading. "You think you can just expose this and walk away? It doesn't work like that in our line of work." Her words struck a nerve, causing Sarah to falter briefly. Just moments ago she had felt empowered, but now she grappled with the weight of potential consequences. yet each hesitation in her actions fanned a flame of determination deep within. "We aren't afraid," Marla asserted, a tinge of defiance in her voice. "If you know something, now is the time to say it. You're at risk too." At that, the nurse's shoulders sagged, and she glanced toward the hallway, a rush of anxiety flashing through her eyes. "Fine. But this is just for you two. You have no idea how far this goes. I can help, but you need to listen carefully." Sarah leaned in, her pulse quickening. All doubts aside, she was now prepared to confront whatever came next. "We're listening." The words emerged like a confession, accompanied by the weight of dread and urgency. "There's a liaison between Piotr and someone high up in administration. They're doing things that have nothing to do with patient care. If you keep digging, you'll attract attention. All kinds of attention." Sarah's mind raced, processing the enormity of what the nurse had disclosed. It wasn't merely an opportunity for insight. It was a manipulation of lives, an insidious network she had barely begun to unravel. "What kind of attention?" Sarah asked, a subtle tremor in her voice punctuating her curiosity. "Dangerous attention," the nurse emphasized, glancing again toward the door. "People who will stop at nothing to protect their interests." The reality of the threat mirrored her inner struggle, a reminder that profound knowledge could lead to perilous outcomes. Still, in that very heartbeat, Sarah's determination crystallized. No longer just a participant in the story, she was part of a narrative larger than herself. "So we expose it. We have to," Sarah asserted, grounding her voice despite the turmoil whirling within her. Just then, the loud crash echoed down the corridor again, this time closer, a warning reverberating through her being. "Time's up," the nurse grimaced, pushing the patient's chart aside. "Get out of here, both of you. Don't let them see you together." As they turned to leave, an icy grip of real danger settled in Sarah's gut. Everything they had uncovered was only the beginning, and with the stakes rising sharply, retreating would only intensify the looming threat. They were on the edge of a precipice, and behind them lay the path of no return. Sarah's heart raced as they fled the private ward, propelled by a mixture of dread and a profound resolve. She hadn't anticipated how deeply this would affect her, how her journey toward agency and power was intertwined with uncovering a dark underbelly lurking within the hospital's walls. "Who exactly are we dealing with?" she mused, the question hanging dangerously in the air. The need for clarity pushed her forward, driven by an insatiable curiosity twined with a call to action. As they rounded the corner, prepared to confront the unknown, Sarah felt the weight of destiny at her shoulders. The real battle had yet to begin, and the answers awaited them, not just in the form of revelations, but in the choices that would shape her future. The nurse's last words echoed in her mind. Just how deep was the corruption within those walls? And would they have the courage to face their enemies head-on, or would they be silenced by the very system they sought to expose? With determination and urgency, Sarah and Marla sprinted through the sterile hallways of the hospital, adrenaline coursing through their veins. The revelation they had encountered was monumental, rewriting the narrative from a simple investigation into a precarious dance with danger. Every instinct within Sarah urged her forward. She could feel the determination coursing through her body like electricity. They emerged into the bustling ER, the frenetic activity contrasting sharply with the gravity of their situation. The fear of exposure that hovered in the air settled like an insistent shroud. "We need to act fast," Sarah said, her voice steadied, driven by an urgent clarity. "We can't let the administration squash our inquiry before it even starts." Marla nodded, her face tightening with resolve. They quickly retreated to the break room, a space marred by their burgeoning sense of purpose. The small fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting frantic shadows across their faces as they dug through their findings once more. "Let's gather everything we have about the patients and the connections to Piotr and the nurse," Sarah suggested emphatically, the analytical side of her personality coming to life. As they piled the pertinent records onto the table, Sarah felt an exhilarating rush of confidence. She was no longer just a caregiver. She was a key player in an unfolding drama. "We can't wait for anyone else to act. We have the power to change this," she asserted. Each file emerged as a reminder of lives intertwined with their investigation, igniting her resolve to not only protect Jin, but to confront the dark truths hidden under the hospital's facade. After hours of studying the data, their findings began to form a cohesive picture. Patterns emerged amid the chaos, highlighting suspicious admissions linked to Jin's injury. "Look at this. Most of these patients were treated right before a significant increase in gang violence," Marla pointed out, her expression shifting from wary to determined. "There's something they're covering up. We need to seize this opportunity." Reinvigorated, they crafted a plan to present their findings to the appropriate authorities. As they loaded the records onto a secure flash drive, Sarah felt a familiar flicker of doubt creeping in. How deep did the corruption run? Could they really trust anyone outside their small circle? Despite the fury gripping the atmosphere, she recognized a profound truth within her, a warrior poised to confront the chaos she had once feared. "Are you ready for this?" Marla asked, breaking the silence as they prepared to step into the next phase. Feeling the weight of her resolve, Sarah squared her shoulders. More than ever. The two made their way to the administrator's office. The imposing presence of the glass doors felt like a threshold into a new realm, where courage would be demanded. A guard at the desk eyed them suspiciously as they entered, but Sarah held her ground. They had come too far to falter now. "Are you request feedback for an emergency meeting?" the guard quipped, a hint of skepticism in his tone. "Actually, we need to see Director Lewis immediately," Sarah asserted, her voice unwavering. "It's of utmost importance." Moments later, they were ushered into the director's office, the faint sounds of hospital life muted behind them. Director Lewis, a seasoned figure draped in an air of authority, scrutinized them from behind a mahogany desk. "What brings you here at this hour?" With each word, Sarah's confidence deepened. She laid out the evidence they had compiled, detailing the connections between the suspicious patients and the danger surrounding Jin. As she spoke, a fire ignited within her. This wasn't just a confrontation, but a demand for justice. The director listened intently, his brows furrowing deeper with each revelation. "This is serious, but it might also lead to reputational damage for the hospital," he finally said, folding his arms. "I understand," Sarah replied, the weight of the moment pressing down heavily upon her. "But ultimately, lives are at stake. We can't let fear stop us from exposing the truth." The director's demeanor shifted gradually, weighing both the facts and the implications of their claims. "If what you've outlined is accurate, then I'm obligated to act. But know this. Once you go down this path, it's irreversible." As he spoke, Sarah encountered a profound clarity. Her purpose crystallized. She was no longer just a nurse, but an advocate for what was right. "Then we must act now," she affirmed. "All right," the director conceded, picking up the phone to call the authorities. As Sarah and Marla stood side by side, a sense of triumph washed over her. They had transformed their trepidation into tangible action, pushing boundaries and confronting a labyrinth of challenges. The stakes grew sharper, but so did their resolve. Days turned into nights as investigations unfolded, the once distant threat now inching closer. As Sarah braced for the impact of the fallout, the reality of her growth amazed her. She had embraced risk, challenged loyalty's boundaries, and emerged as a force in her own narrative. Then, there it was. The moment she had worked tirelessly for unfolded before her as the hospital faced scrutiny, exposing the veins of corruption surrounding Jin and illuminating the darkness lurking in the corners. Within weeks, their efforts bore fruit. Key players were apprehended, and support for Jin's protection grew. As she stood before the fervent crowd outside the hospital, the air charged with hope. A whirlwind of strong emotions coursed through her. They had not only advocated for Jin's life, but harnessed the power of truth to reshape their world. In that moment, Sarah stood tall, realizing she had not only protected those she loved, but had transformed into a beacon of courage. She was now an established piece in both healthcare and justice, reinventing her professional identity. What had once felt insurmountable now receded under the weight of her resolution, each step forging an unyielding path toward fulfillment. This was her achievement. This was who she had become. You need to subscribe now to witness the next exclusive emotional journeys that will inspire you to face your own challenges. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and let others discover these transformative stories. Comment your reactions and theories about Sarah's incredible journey of transformation. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion and understand the power of resilience. Don't wait even one more second to show your support.